Can you be my mother? Chloe, the Mafia boss's daughter, said to a stranger she admired at the restaurant. 2 years ago, her mother died, and her father had promised her that he would definitely find a mother for her. But it's been 2 years now, and she is tired of being lonely. She decided to help her dad. Seems like my dad is slow in finding a woman. I'll help him. Take a seat. Let's dive into her story. The restaurant was supposed to be the easy part of the day. Nadia had earned it. 4 hours on a train from Paris, a client briefing that had run 90 minutes over schedule, a hotel room that smelled faintly of someone else's life. She had researched this place specifically. Small, tucked into the back of a Lyon arcade, no reservations, no music loud enough to think over. A bibimbap that a food blogger she half-trusted had described as the closest thing to Seoul without the flight. One quiet evening, one good meal, alone, which was how she preferred things, which was what she told herself, which she mostly believed. She had been alone for 4 minutes. Then the chair across from her scraped back, and a child climbed into it. Nadia didn't look up from her phone. She'll move on, she thought. They always move on. A beat of silence. Then, can you be my mother? Nadia looked up. The girl was small, 6, maybe 7, with 2 braids surrendering to gravity, one loose strand at a time, and a cloth doll hanging from her fist by the neck. She had a gap between her front teeth and the kind of dark, steady eyes that belonged on someone 3 times her age. She wasn't fidgeting. She wasn't smiling nervously the way children smile when they know they're being bold. She was simply sitting there, across the table, waiting, with the patience of someone who had thought about this and decided it was a reasonable thing to ask. Nadia put her phone down. Of all the things I expected tonight, she thought, that was not one of them. She started. Stopped. Started again. I'm sorry. Can you be my mother? The girl repeated. Slower this time, in case Nadia had misheard. My dad has been saying for 2 years that he'll find me one. He keeps saying soon. He keeps saying when the time is right. She set the doll on the table between them with quiet ceremony. But time keeps being right, and there is still no mother. So I decided to help. Nadia stared at her. The restaurant carried on around them, the low warm percussion of a kitchen at full pace, chopsticks against ceramic, a burst of laughter from the table near the window. Ordinary, indifferent, completely unaware that something was happening at this particular corner table that Nadia had absolutely no framework for. What's your name? Nadia asked, because it was the only thing she could think to say. Chloe. The girl said it like it was obvious, like her name had always been in the room and Nadia had simply not been paying attention. What's yours? Nadia. Chloe turned the name over, visibly, the way children taste new words. That's a story name. It's just a name. All names are story names, Chloe said, with the authority of someone who had given this considerable thought, if you say them right. Then, without losing a beat, you have nice hands. My mum had nice hands. I remember that about her. And there it was. Nadia felt it land, not loudly, not with any drama, just a quiet settling weight somewhere behind her sternum. The kind of thing you can't unhear. She looked at this small person sitting across from her with her unraveling braids and her battered doll and her devastating, matter-of-fact honesty, and felt something move in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. Something she didn't immediately have a name for and wasn't sure she wanted to name. Don't, she told herself. She's a child you met 30 seconds ago. Don't. Where is your mother? Nadia asked gently, though she was already half afraid of the answer. Heaven, Chloe said. Simply. Cleanly. The way children say enormous things, without armor, without warning, which is exactly what makes them land the way they do. She got sick. 2 years ago. She went very fast, my dad says. He says she didn't suffer much. She picked up her doll, smoothed its hair with one small thumb. I think he says that so I feel better. I think maybe it isn't completely true. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of something true having been said in a room, and the room adjusting to hold it. 7 years old, Nadia thought, and already she knows the difference between a comforting lie and a hard truth. She felt a sudden, unexpected rush of something that sat between admiration and ache. "I'm sorry about your mother," she said. "Thank you." Chloe said it with a small, practiced dignity that suggested she had received this condolence many times and had developed a way of carrying it. Then she looked up. "Do you have a mother?"
"Yes."
"Far away." "Do you miss her?" Nadia opened her mouth to say sometimes the easy answer, the one she gave everyone. What came out instead was, "More than I admit." She wasn't sure why she said that. She wasn't sure why this child, who she had known for less than 3 minutes, was somehow bypassing the entire system she had spent years constructing. Chloe nodded, as though this confirmed something she had suspected. Then she leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, very serious. "So you understand," she said, "why it's important, having a mother." "Chloe, I'm not asking you to decide right now," she said quickly. "Reasonable. Preemptively addressing objections, the way someone does when they have rehearsed for pushback. I'm just asking if you would talk to my dad. That's all. Just talk."
She paused.
"He's nice. He's very serious, but there's nice underneath it. He makes pancakes on Sundays with real blueberries. Not from a packet." Another pause for emphasis. "That matters." Nadia looked at her for a long moment. This child, she thought, is going to be absolutely extraordinary when she grows up. She is also, right now, going to be the end of me. "Where is your father?" Nadia asked. Chloe pointed. Nadia looked. She wished for one practical, self-preserving moment that she hadn't. He was sitting 2 tables away, near the window alone. Dark jacket, dark eyes, a jaw that had been arranged by genetics into something with no business being that precise. He was tall, even-seated, broad across the shoulders, with the particular stillness of a man who had long ago stopped needing to perform composure because composure had simply become his resting state. He held a glass of water he hadn't touched. He was watching them, watching her, with an expression that was entirely, professionally unreadable. Except that he knew. That much was obvious. He had been watching his daughter conduct this entire operation. From 2 tables away, and he had not intervened. Had not stood up, had not mouthed an apology across the restaurant, had not done any of the things a man does when he is embarrassed by his child. He had simply sat there and watched and let it happen, which meant one of 2 things. Either he was the kind of father who trusted his daughter completely, who believed that whatever Chloe decided to do in the world was worth at least letting play out, or he had been hoping, on some quiet level he would probably never say out loud, that she would. Nadia looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked back at Chloe. "Don't," she told herself again. "You have a briefing at 9 tomorrow. You have a hotel room and a report to finish and a life that is organized specifically so that evenings like this don't happen." "All right," she heard herself say. "I'll talk to him." She had not decided to say that. It had simply arrived, the way things sometimes did when some part of her that was quieter and less defended than the rest made a unilateral decision. Chloe's face did something extraordinary. It didn't erupt. It wasn't a child's cartoonish explosion of delight. It was slower than that, and somehow more devastating for it. A warmth that started somewhere behind her eyes and moved outward, like light coming through a window when the clouds finally shift. Like a small person who had been carrying a hope very carefully for a very long time and had just been told she could set it down for a moment. It lasted only a second. Then she composed herself, smoothed her doll's hair, and slid off the chair with great dignity. She crossed the restaurant. Nadia watched her go, watched her reach her father's table and plant both small hands on the edge of it. Watched her begin talking. Fast, focused, the full force of her personality aimed directly at him. Jae-won listened without moving, without expression. His eyes came to Nadia's table once, briefly, and she was looking directly at him again, and again did not look away in time. Stop that, she told herself. He looked back at his daughter. Chloe finished whatever she was saying. She straightened up. She turned to face the restaurant with the squared shoulders of someone delivering a verdict. And then, in a voice that carried cleanly over the noise of a full dining room, she said,
Dad.
Since you were too slow, I found one myself. Nadia laughed. It came out of her before she could do anything about it. Real laughter, unguarded, the kind that lives below all your careful architecture and escapes when something catches you completely off guard. The kind she hadn't heard from herself in so long that it felt, for just a moment, like laughing in a language she used to speak fluently and had almost forgotten. Several tables looked over. She didn't care. Across the restaurant, J1 looked at her. And for the first time, the controlled, composed, entirely unreadable face did something. Not a full smile, nothing so unguarded as that. But the corner of his mouth moved. His eyes changed. Something in him that had been held at a precise, professional distance shifted, just slightly, just enough. Careful, Nadia thought, the laughter still fading in her chest. Be careful. He said something to Chloe. Short, quiet. Chloe nodded with the satisfaction of a general whose battle plan had succeeded, climbed back into her own chair, and returned to her rice with serene composure. J1 stood. He was taller than she'd estimated. He moved with the unhurried, deliberate ease of a man who had never rushed toward anything in his life, who had learned, or perhaps had always known, that presence was more powerful than speed. He crossed the restaurant without looking around it, without checking faces or exits the way Nadia did automatically everywhere she went. Although, she noticed, with the professional part of her brain that never fully clocked off, that he didn't need to check. He had already checked. When he first sat down, probably. He knew this room. He just didn't need to show it. Interesting, she thought, and filed it away, and told herself it meant nothing. He stopped at her table. Up close he was. She searched for a clinical word, and did not find one. He was composed in the way that certain things are composed, music, maybe, or architecture. Intentional. Each part of him in its right place. He had a small scar along his left jawline, faint and old, and dark eyes that were tired in a way she recognized because she saw it in herself every morning and had stopped being surprised by it. The tiredness that sleep doesn't touch. The kind that comes from carrying something heavy for a long time and getting so used to the weight that you've forgotten what it felt like before. I apologize, he said. His voice was low, measured. The apology was genuine and also, she noticed, not entirely an apology. You're not sorry, she said. A pause. The almost smile.
No, he said.
Not completely. He looked at the chair across from her, the one Chloe had occupied, with a question in his eyes. She gestured at it. He pulled it out and sat, and the table that had felt like solitude 10 minutes ago now felt like something else entirely. Something she didn't have a clean word for yet. J1, he said. Nadia.
A beat.
He glanced toward Chloe, then back. She told you about the pancakes. It was her opening argument. It always is. Something moved in his face. Fond and tired, and underneath both of those things, something that looked like love so large it had nowhere comfortable to put itself. She has been practicing that speech for a while. I didn't know she was planning to use it tonight. Were you going to stop her? He considered the question seriously, which she appreciated. He didn't reach for the easy answer. No, he said finally. I don't think I was. Nadia looked at him. Why not? He turned his water glass slowly on the table. Not nervous, thinking. She was already learning the difference. Because she's been so careful with that hope, he said quietly. She doesn't take it out very often. I didn't want to be the one to put it away. The restaurant blurred slightly at the edges of Nadia's awareness. The noise, the movement, the warm smell of the kitchen, all of it receded a half step, the way the world does when something inside you suddenly requires your full attention. Don't, she thought. He's a stranger. You leave in 4 days. Don't. She said her mother passed 2 years ago, Nadia said carefully. Yes. He said it without flinching, which told her he'd had practice saying it. The word worn smooth by repetition, by the necessity of saying it to teachers and doctors and well-meaning neighbors and strangers on difficult evenings. Chloe was 5. She remembers more than I thought she would. Children surprise you.
A pause.
She remembers her hands.
She told me that.
He looked up. Something passed through his eyes, brief, unguarded, gone before she could fully read it. But she caught the shape of it. The particular expression of a man hearing that his child has shared something precious with a stranger and not knowing whether to feel grateful or exposed. She doesn't tell everyone that, he said. Quietly. I know, Nadia said. I could tell. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the silence of two people who have just exchanged something real without entirely meaning to and are now sitting with the weight of it, deciding what to do. The waiter came. She ordered the bibimbap. Jae-won ordered in Korean. Easy, natural, a brief back and forth that made the waiter smile and nod with the warmth of someone unexpectedly heard in their own language.
Seoul.
Nadia asked when the waiter had gone. For years. You? I lived there briefly. A long time ago. She touched the edge of her menu. For work. What work? The question was casual. His eyes were not. Risk consulting, she said. I help companies understand what they don't know. He nodded slowly. And what they don't know costs them. Almost always. And you? He held her gaze. What does it cost you? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at him across the small table and thought, who asks that? Who asks that in the first 5 minutes? It's good work, she said, which was not an answer, and they both knew it. He didn't push. He simply waited, in that still, unhurried way of his, which was somehow more unsettling than pushing would have been. Because pushing she knew how to deflect. Patience she had less practice with. It's lonely sometimes, she said. The words arrived before she'd authorized them. Again, this table apparently being some kind of temporary suspension of her better judgment. Different city every few weeks. You stop, she paused, chose carefully. You stop putting pictures on walls. Because it seems pointless when you're leaving. She heard how that sounded. More than she'd meant to give. But he didn't look at her with pity, which she would not have been able to bear. He looked at her with recognition. The specific recognition of someone who understands a thing from the inside. I had a life like that, he said. Before Lyon. Before her. His eyes went to Chloe, who was now reading a small book she'd produced from somewhere, lips moving faintly over the words. I told myself I preferred it. The movement. The not staying. A pause. I was lying, but I was very convincing. To who? Mostly myself. He looked back at her. My wife used to say I was the most disciplined liar she had ever met. That I could convince myself of anything if I needed to function. Something shifted in his expression. Older, quieter. She wasn't wrong. Was that? Nadia stopped.
I'm sorry.
That's too much.
No.
He shook his head slightly.
Ask.
She looked at him. At the steadiness in his face. The deliberate openness of a man who had decided, somewhere along the way, that honesty was less exhausting than its alternative. Was the marriage happy? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. A real moment. Not performing consideration, but actually sitting inside the question, turning it over, giving it the respect of a true answer. It was real, he said finally. Which is not the same thing as happy, but I think it might be more important. His jaw tightened slightly, then released. We were better at honesty than we were at ease. We loved each other in the way that sometimes costs more than it gives. But it was real. Every day of it was real. He paused. I am grateful for that. I am also still, he searched, still finding the edges of it. Still understanding what shape it left. Nadia said nothing. Because nothing was the right thing. Because some things you don't respond to with words, you just receive them and let them be true in the room for a moment. Real, she thought. He said real. She tried to remember the last time someone had described love to her as real rather than good or perfect or wonderful. All those smooth, uninhabited words. She tried to remember the last time she had sat across a table from someone and felt the specific sensation she was feeling now, not attraction or not only that, but something more unsettling. The feeling of being in the presence of someone whose inner life was as complicated as her own. The feeling of being, for the first time in longer than she could honestly remember, not the most defended person in a conversation. For days, she reminded herself, you have 4 days in this city and then you are gone.
Her food arrived.
The bibimbap came in its stone bowl, crackling with heat, egg yolk perfect and unbroken in the center. She looked at it and felt, absurdly, close to something that might have been tears if she had been the kind of person who did that in Korean restaurants in Lyon, which she was not. She picked up her spoon. Nadia, Chloe called across the table. She looked up. Yes. Do you like blueberries? Jae-won closed his eyes briefly. She watched him do it. This small, exhausted, loving gesture, and felt something turn over in her chest so quietly it was almost nothing. Almost. I do, Nadia called back. Chloe nodded, returned to her book. Good, she said. That's important. Jae-won opened his eyes. He looked at Nadia across the table, this woman who had appeared in the orbit of his evening without warning, who had laughed at his daughter's announcement with her whole self, who said lonely and meant it, who had just answered a 7-year-old's question about blueberries with the same seriousness she brought to everything else. He looked at her the way she was beginning to recognize.
Steadily.
Without performance. With the careful, reluctant attention of a man who had told himself he was not ready for this and was now sitting across from evidence that readiness might not be the point. Don't, he was probably telling himself. She recognized the look of that too. She looked back at him. Outside, Lyon moved through its evening, golden and unhurried. Lights coming on in long amber rows along the arcade. People passing with their coats and their conversations and their small, ordinary lives. None of them knowing what was happening at this corner table, which was nothing dramatic, nothing declared, nothing that could be pointed to and named. Just 2 people, sitting across a small restaurant table, learning the shape of each other. Just a beginning, quiet and uninvited, arriving the way beginnings sometimes do. Not when you are ready, not when it is convenient, not when you have left room for it. But when a small girl with unraveling braids looks across a restaurant, points at a stranger, and says, I found one myself. The evening had settled into something Nadia hadn't planned for. That was the problem with evenings like this. They arrived looking like one thing and became another while you weren't paying attention. She had come here for bibimbap and solitude. She had gotten bibimbap, a 7-year-old's unsolicited life restructuring, and a man sitting across from her who said things like it was real and meant them, and who looked at her like she was a problem he hadn't decided yet whether he wanted to solve. She was finishing the last of her rice. Chloe had abandoned her book and was now attempting to teach her cloth doll to sit upright against the water glass, a project that kept failing and kept being restarted with the same patient determination. Jae-won had ordered tea. He wasn't drinking. The restaurant had thinned around them, tables emptying, the kitchen quieting to a simmer, the waiter beginning the slow choreography of end of evening. It was comfortable. That was the word. Comfortable, which sounds like a small thing until you have spent enough years in rooms where you were always, on some frequency, on guard. Where some part of you was always listening for the thing beneath the thing. Comfort, real comfort, the kind that doesn't require you to perform ease but simply allows it, was rarer than people understood. She was thinking about this, about how strange it was to feel it here, now, with these people she had not known 2 hours ago, when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. The hotel.
Odd, she thought.
Hotels didn't call guests at. She checked the time. 8:47 in the evening, unless something was wrong. She felt the familiar, quiet shift inside her, the professional part sliding forward, the part that did not panic but simply became very still and very ready. She answered. She hadn't noticed, in the movement of reaching for the phone, that her thumb had caught the speaker button. She noticed a half-second later when the voice came out into the open air of the table instead of privately into her ear, and by then it was already speaking. Ms. Nadia, this is the front desk at Hotel Lumiere. I'm calling to inform you that I need to ask you not to return to the hotel this evening. There is an incident. The police have been called. We are advising all guests currently outside the building to find alternative accommodation until the situation is resolved. We are deeply sorry for the— What kind of incident? Nadia said. Her voice was level. Professionally, deliberately level. The voice she used when she needed the other person to stay calm and found that the fastest route was to model it herself. A robbery, Ms. Nadia. Armed. It is. The building is not safe at the moment. Your belongings are secured, we believe, but we cannot. We are not able to guarantee access until tomorrow morning at the earliest.
We are so sorry.
We will, of course. That's fine, she said. Thank you for calling. She ended the call. The table was very quiet. She became aware, in the particular way you become aware of something you've been trying not to notice, that the phone had been on speaker the entire time. That the call had played out into the warm, half-empty restaurant like a small announcement. That across the table, J1 had gone very still in the way he went still when he was thinking quickly and not showing it. And that Chloe had put down her doll. She was sitting straight up in her chair, both hands flat on the table, staring at Nadia with those dark, serious eyes wide open and working.
Processing.
The small face moving through something, first confusion, then understanding, then something else, something that arrived with a speed and a force that caught Nadia entirely off guard. You don't have anywhere to sleep, Chloe said. I'll find somewhere, Nadia said. Lightly.
Practically.
Already reaching for her phone to open a search, already assembling the logistics in her head the way she assembled all problems, cleanly, quickly, without drama. It's fine. There are other hotels. It's almost 9 o'clock, Chloe said. Hotels don't close, Chloe. But she stopped. Something was happening in her face. The composure she wore, this extraordinary, too old composure that Nadia had been marveling at all evening, was doing something it apparently didn't do very often. It was slipping. Not dramatically. Not in collapse. But at the edges, the way ice slips when the temperature shifts, the structure's still there, but something underneath it beginning to move. You could stay with us, Chloe said. Her voice was different. Smaller. Stripped of the earlier confidence, the campaign energy, the 7-year-old negotiator who had opened the evening by asking a stranger to be her mother. This was something underneath all of that. Something that had been waiting under everything else like a current under still water. Chloe, J1 said. Low, careful. We have a room, she said. She wasn't looking at her father. She was looking at Nadia. Only at Nadia, with an intensity that made the air at the table feel different. It's clean. It has a good blanket. I know because I slept in it once when I had a bad dream and didn't want to wake Dad. A breath. You could have it. Just for tonight. Just until your hotel is safe again. Nadia opened her mouth. Please, Chloe said. And that word, that single, small, undecorated word, landed in the room with a weight entirely disproportionate to its size. Because it wasn't a child asking a favor. It wasn't the bright, strategic, forward-moving Chloe of earlier in the evening. This was something older. Something that lived in the part of her that was 5 years old and standing at a graveside and had been working very hard ever since to be okay about it. Nadia looked at her. Don't, she thought. But softer this time. Much softer. She looked at J1. He was looking at his daughter. And the expression on his face, she would think about it later, lying in the dark, turning it over, was one of the most complicated things she had ever seen on a human face. Love, enormous and helpless. A father watching his child want something and not knowing whether to protect her from the wanting or let her have it. Confusion, genuine confusion, the kind that doesn't perform itself, at what his daughter had just done, this child who was fierce and funny and strategic and apparently, underneath all of it, lonely in a way that a good father and real blueberries and Sunday pancakes couldn't entirely fix. And something else. Something he was not showing Chloe but that Nadia caught because she was watching carefully, and she was very good at watching carefully. He wasn't entirely sure he wanted to say no either. He looked up, met her eyes, and in the look was everything he couldn't say in front of his daughter. This is not something I planned. This is not something I know how to navigate. She has never done this before, and I do not know what it means, and I do not know what you must think of us, and I am sorry, and I am also. He didn't finish the thought. She watched him decide not to finish it. He looked at Chloe, back at Nadia, and nodded. Once. Small. The nod of a man stepping off a ledge he has been standing on the edge of for long enough that stepping feels, at some point, more honest than staying. If you need somewhere, he said quietly. You're welcome. The words were measured. Careful. Everything he said was careful. She was learning, constructed with the precision of a man who had decided long ago that careless words cost too much. But under the careful, if you listened for it, was something that wasn't careful at all. Nadia looked at them both. This man and his daughter, sitting across a restaurant table in a city she had arrived in this morning for work, for 4 days, for a client briefing and a good meal, and nothing else. She thought about the hotel, about the other hotels she could find, about the efficient, solitary apparatus of her life that was very good at solving exactly this kind of logistical problem and had solved it in a dozen cities before this one. She thought about Chloe's face when she said please. Just for tonight, Nadia said. Chloe didn't cheer, didn't bounce in her chair, or clap her hands. She did something quieter and more devastating than any of that. She reached across the table and put her small hand over Nadia's. Just for a moment. Just briefly. Then she picked up her doll and climbed down from her chair as though nothing had happened, as though she hadn't just done something that made Nadia's chest ache in a way she had no clean category for. I'll show you the blanket, Chloe said. Businesslike now. Moving. It's the blue one. It's very soft. Jaewon watched his daughter walk toward the exit to retrieve her coat, and then he looked at Nadia, and in the amber light of the emptying restaurant, he looked like a man standing at the beginning of something he hadn't read the end of yet. Neither had she. She doesn't do that, he said quietly. The hand. She doesn't. She's careful with that. Who she gives it to. Nadia looked down at her own hand on the table, at the small ghost of warmth still there. I know, she said. She didn't know how she knew. She just did. He stood, reached for his jacket, and as he held it, for just one unguarded moment, she saw it, the thing he'd been carrying all evening under the composure and the precision and the careful words. The same thing she'd been carrying. The particular exhaustion of someone who has been brave for a very long time, for someone else's sake, and has almost forgotten that it was ever a choice. She recognized it the way you recognize your own face. She stood too, reached for her bag, and they walked toward the exit together, not touching, not talking, with Chloe 3 steps ahead holding her doll by the neck and narrating, quietly and to no one in particular, the specifications of the blue blanket. Outside, Lyon had gone to night. The arcade lights threw long amber lines across the wet stone. The air was cold and clean and carried the faint smell of the river. Nadia walked beside a man she had not known 3 hours ago, toward a home she had never seen, in a city she had come to leave, and did not, for the first time in longer than she could name, feel like leaving. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had been old for a long time and had decided to be dignified about it. Stone staircase, wrought iron banister, a narrow lift that Chloe announced was broken in a tone that suggested this was a long-standing personal grievance. It has been broken since March, she informed Nadia, beginning the climb with the resignation of someone who has made peace with a recurring injustice. I told Dad to call the man. He called the man. The man came. It is still broken. These things take time, Jaewon said behind them. It has been 7 months, Chloe said. These things take a lot of time. Chloe looked back at Nadia with an expression that said, plainly, you see what I'm working with. Nadia pressed her lips together and said nothing and watched her feet on the stairs and told herself that the warmth moving through her chest was simply the exertion of climbing. It was not the exertion of climbing. The fourth-floor landing had 2 doors and a small window that looked out over the rooftops of the arcade, and beyond them the faint amber glow of the city against the dark sky. J1 came up the last of the stairs and moved past them to the door on the left, and it was there, in the small geography of a 4th-floor landing, in the entirely ordinary act of a man reaching past a woman to fit his key in a lock, that it happened. He was close. Closer than the landing required, or perhaps exactly as close as the landing required, the space being what it was, narrow and lit by a single overhead bulb. She felt the warmth of him before she fully registered the proximity. Smelled something clean and faint, not cologne. Just him, just the particular human warmth of someone who had been present all evening and was now simply closer. She went very still. He turned the key. And in the half-second before the door opened, he glanced at her. Just briefly. Just the instinctive glance of someone checking their immediate space, the way you do without thinking. Except he didn't look away immediately. Neither did she. It lasted a moment only.
A breath.
The key already turned, the lock already open, the door already beginning to move, and both of them in that narrow landing light looking at each other with the particular expression of people who have been carefully not looking all evening and have just, accidentally, stopped. She saw it in his face. She had meant to look for it, but it was there. Something unguarded, something that lived below all the precision and the composure, surfacing for just that one undefended second before he controlled it back down. She wondered what he saw in hers. Then Chloe walked between them into the apartment and turned on the light and announced that she was hungry again, and the moment closed like water over a stone, and they both followed her inside. The apartment was not what Nadia had expected. She wasn't sure what she had expected. Something sparse, perhaps. Something that looked like a man managing, functional, and somewhat empty, the way places look when someone is keeping the practical lights on but hasn't found the energy for anything beyond that. It wasn't that. It was full. Not cluttered, but lived in, genuinely lived in the way that takes time and the specific investment of someone who has decided that home is worth making. Books on every surface, organized in a system that appeared to be half genre and half color, and entirely Chloe's doing. A low shelf near the door dedicated entirely to small things, a painted rock, a dried flower in a glass, a clay figure that had clearly been made by small hands and clearly been given a place of honor. Drawings on the refrigerator. A coat rack that had more coats than 2 people needed. The smell of something that had been cooked earlier. Garlic, sesame. The ghost of a good meal. And photographs. Not many, but placed carefully. A woman laughing at something outside the frame. Beautiful, dark-haired, caught mid-motion, alive in the way that photographs of the dead are alive, which is to say permanently and heartbreakingly. A smaller photo beside it. The same woman, J1 younger and less careful with his face, Chloe as a baby in someone's arms, the 3 of them squinting into sun somewhere warm. Nadia looked at the photographs for exactly as long as was respectful and then looked away. Real, she thought. He said real. Sit, Chloe commanded, pointing at the kitchen table with the authority of someone in her own domain. I'll make tea. You don't make tea, J1 said, hanging his jacket. I can learn right now. She was already pulling open a cabinet, standing on her toes, surveying the shelves with professional focus. The green one, he said. Bottom left. And don't touch the kettle. I know not to touch the kettle. You said that last time. Last time was different. Nadia stood in the center of the kitchen and felt, with a sudden and inconvenient clarity, exactly how uncomfortable she was. Not because the apartment was unwelcoming. It was the opposite of unwelcoming. Not because they had been anything but, she searched for the right word, kind. They had been unreasonably kind, both of them, in completely different ways that somehow added up to the same thing. She was uncomfortable because she had no architecture for this. Her life was built on knowable quantities, controlled environments, hotels with key cards and room service, and the clean anonymity of spaces that didn't belong to anyone. She could walk into a boardroom in a city she'd never visited and read every person in it inside of 10 minutes. She could negotiate in 3 languages and eat alone in restaurants in 4 countries and sleep, when she slept, in beds that left no impression of her when she rose. She did not do this. She did not stand in strangers' kitchens while their daughters made tea they didn't know how to make, in apartments full of someone else's photographs, feeling the particular low-frequency hum of a life she had not chosen and could not categorize. And underneath the discomfort, deeper, less convenient, was the reason for it. 3 months. That was how long it had been since Daniel. Since the conversation in the kitchen of the apartment they had shared for 2 years, the conversation that had been coming for longer than either of them had admitted, that had finally arrived on a Tuesday evening while pasta boiled on the stove, and they had both stood there and said true things to each other in tired voices and known, with the specific sadness of 2 people who had genuinely tried, that it was done. "You're never really here," he had said. Not unkindly. That was almost worse, the absence of unkindness, the gentleness of a man who is not angry, just finally, quietly, truthful. "Even when you're here, Nadia, you're somewhere else." "I can't," he had stopped. Started again. "I can't love a person who won't let me find them." She had not argued. There was no argument. He was right in the way that people are right when they've had a long time to think about something and have finally found the words. She had moved her things out on a Thursday. She had been moving between cities since. She had told herself it was work. It was, in fact, also work. She had told herself she was fine. She was, in fact, mostly fine, in the way that you are mostly fine when you are good at functioning and have built a life that requires it. But she had not, since that Thursday, sat in anyone's home, had not eaten at anyone's table, had not allowed herself to be in a space that belonged to someone else's life, someone else's photographs, someone else's careful accumulation of meaning. Because spaces like that required you to feel things. And she had been, with great discipline and moderate success, not doing that. She became aware that J1 was watching her. He was leaning against the counter, arms loosely crossed, watching her stand in the middle of his kitchen with the expression of a man who was reading something he hadn't been given permission to read, but had been given it anyway, by accident, because she had forgotten for a moment to close the page. She straightened, assembled herself.
"I'm sorry. I'm intruding."
"I can still find a—" "Sit down, Nadia," he said, quietly. Not a command. Something gentler than a command, which was somehow harder to refuse. She sat down. Chloe placed a mug of tea in front of her, with great ceremony. It was not very good tea, slightly too strong, slightly too hot, made with the focused inexpertise of someone doing something for the first time. It was also, for reasons Nadia could not entirely explain, one of the most touching things she had received in recent memory.
"Thank you," she said.
Chloe beamed, pulled out the chair beside her. Saturday. J1 brought his own mug to the table and sat across from them, and for a moment the 3 of them simply existed in the warm kitchen light, in the smell of the earlier meal and the faint sound of the city 4 floors below, and no one said anything. Then Chloe said, "Dad." She folded her hands on the table. The gesture Nadia recognized now, small hands, deliberate placement, the posture of someone preparing to say something important. "I want to tell you something." He looked at her over his mug. "All right. About why I need a mother." The kitchen went very still. Nadia watched J1's face move through something, a quick internal adjustment, the recalibration of a man who had expected, perhaps, to have his conversation in private and was now having it here, at his own table, in front of a woman he had known for 3 hours. She watched him decide to let it happen anyway. "Tell me," he said. Chloe took a small breath. She looked at the table. organizing her thoughts the way she organized everything, methodically, seriously, with the particular gravity of a child who feels things at full volume and has learned to speak about them carefully. "When I wake up and my hair is difficult," she began, "you try. I know you try, Dad. But you don't. You do the braids, but they're not right. And I don't say anything because you're trying and I don't want to make you feel bad."
She paused.
Mum used to do them while I was still half asleep. I didn't even have to sit up properly. She just knew how. J1 said nothing. The muscle in his jaw moved once. "And when I'm sick," Chloe continued, "you stay home from work and you make the soup and you sit with me, and I know that's love, I know it is. But Mum used to, she would lie next to me. In the bed. The whole day. Even when I was asleep, she would stay. And I would wake up and she would still be there, and it felt," she searched, "it felt like nothing could be wrong enough to matter. Because she was there." The apartment was very quiet. Nadia was looking at the table. She was looking at the table because she did not trust her face right now, and she could not leave the room. "And at school," Chloe said, softer now, "Margot's mother comes to the gate. Every day. And she brings a snack and she asks about the day and she touches Margot's face when she talks to her. She lifted her own small hand and touched her own cheek briefly, demonstrating. Like that. Like she can't help it. Like she just needs to know Margot is real." She put her hand back down. "I see it every day. I stand at the gate and I see it." Nadia pressed her lips together hard. "Don't," she told herself, for the dozenth time tonight. And this time it was not about J1 or proximity or unsaid things. It was about a 7-year-old standing at a school gate watching another mother touch another child's face and understanding, with a precision that no child should have to develop, exactly what she was missing. "I know you love me, Dad," Chloe said. She looked up at him now, directly, and her eyes were bright but her voice was steady, and the combination of those two things was one of the bravest things Nadia had ever witnessed. "I know you would do anything. I know you work hard, and you make the pancakes, and you stayed in Lyon because it was quieter, and you thought it would help me. I know all of that."
A breath.
I want someone to touch my face at the gate. I want someone to stay in the bed when I'm sick. I want someone who knows about the braids without me having to explain." The silence that followed was the kind that happens after true things. J1 put his mug down. He reached across the table and covered his daughter's folded hands with one of his, large, square, completely still, and he held them, and he looked at her with an expression that Nadia could only describe as a man standing in the full presence of his own inadequacy and refusing to look away from it. "I know, baby," he said.
Low.
Rough at the edges. "I know. I'm not saying you're not enough," Chloe said quickly. "I'm not saying that. I know you're not. I'm just saying there's a shape," she said. "A mother-shaped space. And love can't always fill a shape it wasn't made for." Where, Nadia thought, does a 7-year-old find words like that? Where does she find them, and how does she say them so cleanly, without bitterness, without accusation, just the plain, true shape of a thing that is missing? She became aware that her hand was pressed flat against the table, that she had put it there at some point during the last few minutes without noticing, the way you reach for something solid when the ground shifts. She became aware, a moment later, that Chloe was looking at it, then looking at her. Then, with those dark, serious, luminous eyes, looking at her father. The look of a child who has said what she needed to say, who has opened a door and is now simply standing beside it, patient and certain, waiting for the adults to understand what she already understands. J1 looked up from his daughter's face. He looked at Nadia, and she looked back at him, across the kitchen table of an apartment she had not expected to be in a city she had come to leave, with her hand flat on the table and her chest full of something she did not have a name for, looking at a man who was looking at her with a careful, reluctant, unmistakable expression of someone who is beginning, against all his better planning, to feel something. Neither of them spoke. Chloe picked up her tea, took a sip, set it down. The blanket is very soft, she said, to no one in particular. You'll sleep well. The apartment went quiet the moment Chloe's door clicked shut. Not the quiet of emptiness. The other kind, the kind that arrives when two people are suddenly alone and become, in the same instant, acutely aware of it. J1 stood in the hallway. Nadia stood in the doorway of the guest room. 3 feet between them. Maybe 4. The bathroom is across the hall, he said. Clean towels on the rail. Thank you. They were talking about towels because talking about towels was safe. Because the alternative was standing in a hallway saying nothing and letting the silence ask its questions out loud. He nodded. His eyes moved to the guest room behind her, to the blue blanket, to the lamp, and then came back to her face and stayed there a moment too long. Stop looking at me like that, she thought.
She did not say it.
She was not entirely sure she meant it. She pressed her shoulder lightly against the door frame. A small steadying. She hoped he didn't notice. She suspected he did. He noticed everything. She was learning the same way she did, which was one of the inconvenient things about him. For days, she told herself. The thought had become a rhythm by now. You are here for 4 days. You have a briefing at 9 tomorrow. You're very good at leaving. Start practicing. But she was still standing in the doorway. And he was still standing in the hallway. And neither of them was moving. You should sleep, he said. His voice was lower than it had been at the restaurant. More careful. The voice of a man working to keep something in that was looking for a way out. Yes, she said. She didn't move. He didn't move. The lamp threw its soft light between them. Outside, a car passed slowly. The apartment settled around them with the small sounds of old buildings at night. Pipes. Wood. The particular silence of a place that has held a family and still carries the shape of it. He wants to say something, she thought. She could see it, forming behind his eyes, arriving, being assessed, being set aside. She had watched him do this all evening, each time choosing the careful thing over the real thing, each time rebuilding the distance after something had briefly closed it. She understood. She was doing it too. Because the real thing, the thing that had no business being said on the first night, in a hallway, to a man whose daughter was asleep 3 doors away, was sitting directly behind her sternum, fully formed, waiting. I haven't felt like this in so long I'd started to think I'd lost the capacity for it. You looked at me tonight like I was worth looking at, and I don't know what to do with that. She said none of it. He was doing the same. She could feel the effort of it, the specific tension of a person holding something in. He was standing in his own hallway in his own home, fighting a quiet fight he had not agreed to have tonight, and was not winning. She's going to leave, he was thinking. She didn't need to hear it. She could see it in the way he looked at her, and then away. For days, and then she's gone. And Chloe will ask about her. And I will have to find something to say. This is not the time. She is not the person. She almost believed him. J1, she said. She hadn't planned to say his name. It arrived on its own. He looked at her. Thank you, she said. For tonight.
It was not what she had been going to say.
But it was true, and it was safe, and it settled in the space between them like something neither of them had to pick up and carry. Something moved in his face. Then, slowly, with the deliberateness of a man executing a decision before he can reverse it, he straightened, looked at her one last time, and in that last look she saw everything. A man who was feeling something he had not given himself permission to feel, who was choosing, out of discipline or fear or something between the two, to close the door on it.
For now.
The for now was there. She was certain of it.
Good night, he said.
Good night. He turned and walked to his room.
His door closed.
She stood alone in the hallway for a moment. Then she went inside, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at her hands in the lamplight. She lay back, pulled the blue blanket over herself, stared at the ceiling. Morning, she told herself. In the morning this is simple. You wake up early, you thank them, you leave. You have made an entire life out of leaving. This is nothing different. She believed this. The ceiling offered no argument. She believed this. She closed her eyes and thought about discipline and sense and not letting one dinner undo years of careful living. Then she thought about the look on his face before his door closed. Stop. Down the hall, J1 sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, elbows on his knees, and said nothing. He was good at silence, had refined it over years of work that required him to be the stillest, most unreadable person in any room. Silence had never cost him anything before.
Tonight it cost him something.
Because in the silence was everything he hadn't said in the hallway. Every word he had looked at and chosen to step back from. He had made a rule for himself after his wife died. Nothing that could hurt Chloe. Nothing you're not sure of. Nothing that leaves. It was a good rule. He pressed his hands together. She had said lonely and meant it. He had watched the word arrive before she decided to give it, watched her look away when she realized. And he had felt it, the recognition of it, sharp and immediate. The loneliness of someone who moves too much, who has made leaving a personality because staying requires something she isn't sure she has left. He knew that person. He had been that person. He lay back, stared at the ceiling. She leaves in 4 days. He had said it to himself all evening, and it was still true, and it was landing harder each time, not softer, which told him something he didn't want to know. He thought about the hallway, about the 3 feet between them that had felt like nothing and everything simultaneously, about the way she had looked at him, composed, careful, all of it held in, and underneath it, the same shape as what he was holding. He had almost said it, had felt the words reach the edge of him, had chosen good night instead. It was the right choice. He was nearly sure it was the right choice. He closed his eyes. Through the wall, 2 people lay in the dark on opposite sides of the same silence, staring at the same ceiling, losing the same argument with themselves. Outside, Lyon went on without them. Inside, something continued its slow, uninvited, completely inconvenient work. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments what you think might happen next between them. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts. It really means a lot to us.